Share via email. Report story. Chapter 3. The quiet was starting to get to her. They were eating their ramen on opposite sides of the countertop, legs dangling off the edge, the clack of chopsticks on bowls the only sound to break the silence. Even the noise from the blizzard had stopped, snow no longer falling, violent winds no longer buffeting the outside of Izuku's home. It wasn't long past 9, but the clouds that had been blocking out the sky were gone, and it was easy to see that the moon was already out, shedding pale light on the eerily still landscape outside. She was going to go crazy. She didn't know what she wanted him to say, but she knew it wasn't nothing. And yet, save a half dozen guilt-ridden apologies for letting her slip, that's exactly what she'd gotten. Then again, she couldn't blame him. How do you even talk about something like that? The thought sprung up, unbidden, of how his strong hands had felt on her waist, having her legs wrapped around him, staring breathlessly into his eyes as they embraced. And that's what it had been, hadn't it? An embrace. She remembered the feeling of being pressed up against him, how it made warmth pool in the pit of her stomach. He was really hot. She remembered the boy she'd met at the entrance exam, awkward and shy, athletic in a stringy way, and could hardly recognize him as the same Izuku that had been holding her. He'd gotten taller, and filled out in a way that made her face red if she thought about it for too long. He had broad shoulders, and brawny arms, and she had felt the muscles across his chest tensing and releasing when he'd been grappling her, and that really hadn't helped her combat effectiveness. His face was different too. Whether it was the result of age or exercise, his features were stronger now, his jawline well defined, and he had the suggestion of high cheekbones underneath his freckles. What's more, it felt right to be held by him, like there was something unlocking in her chest. She'd wanted to kiss him so badly that she was filled with a peculiarly directionless kind of self-loathing, where she didn't know if she hated herself for not doing it or hated herself for letting it get that close. They were going to be pro-heroes. It wasn't an easy road to walk even if you were 100% focused, and it certainly wasn't made easier by being in a relationship. Didn't she owe it to her parents to give it her all? A sudden swoop of empathy filled the hollows of her chest when she thought about the hero Izuku would become. He had a powerful quirk, and it would be the death of him. It wouldn't be from blowback, not from the broken arms or shattered legs that had plagued him during his first year at UA, but because he would never let himself stop. How could he? With a quirk like that, he had to know that every hour he was off the streets would mean another store robbed, another citizen mugged, another person assaulted. She could imagine him working till the early hours of the morning, getting as little sleep as possible to spend as much time saving people, because the agencies would have to mobilize a veritable fleet of heroes to make up for his absence. She knew him better than anybody, and even though he understood that he couldn't save everyone, he would kill himself trying, and her heart broke a little for him. She drew her knees up to her chin as she set her bowl to the side, blinking through the tears that manifested without warning. She really was being selfish. Her throat hurt, and she was about to open her mouth to say something, an apology, probably, when he beat her to it. "I'm sorry, Ochako. It's fine, really," she responded, blinking away her tears and forcing a laugh. "I don't know how many times I need to tell you that, silly. I should have been ready." She took a glance over her shoulder. He was hunched over, frown etched into the lines of his face, so worried it made her want to cry out. Promoted stories. You'll also like Izuku's Harem Academia 184K 1.7 Qst. Read. The hero who sings with a smile 38.3K 363 high. Guys, this is my first story I write on Wattpad. I hope you like it. Much needed love. Yandere Succubus Momo X Izu. 50.4K 792 after Wattpad had decided to delete this story out of nowhere. I and many reader were distraught. So I'm making a remake of the story from the ground up to compensate. Zero Deku Onishots 31.3K 791 because of circumstances, this book won't be continued unfortunately. Feel free to check out my other stuff. Thank you for understanding. I am sequel of You Are check mark 69.4K 1.8K. This book is the sequel of You Are, so better read that first before going here. Tears of joy, tears of joy. Thank you to that one reader that suggested this title. I can't see you sad face, but thank you. Finished. 8.3K 508 tilde. He save all of them, just a smile plastered on his face before disappearing through the wind. The Heroes Return MHAXJJK, ongoing 113K 1.7K and quad. Izuku. Midoriya, after being betrayed and killed, vanishes leaving hurt people behind. After 2 months in a hack, he come back. Changed. How will the class re? No, not that. Well, yes, that, a little bit. I still am really sorry for dropping you and I should have been more careful, but, I shouldn't have picked you up like that in the first place. She struggled to inject a breeziness into her voice that she didn't feel. Oh, that's what you're worried about. Deku. We spar all the time. Never like that, he said quietly. The retort she was readying died in her throat. No, she admitted. So, I'm sorry. No, Deku, I liked it. I wanted it to last longer. I wanted to kiss you. I still want to kiss you. She thought of her parents. She thought of the heroes they were going to be. I know what you're talking about, and it's okay. He met her gaze, doubt marring his expression. Really? We sparred. We were full of adrenaline. I was a little dizzy from using my quirk for a while, and we're friends. It's really okay, Deku. Something washed over Izuku's face for a split second. He closed his eyes, and the strain in the angles of his body loosened like he'd had a pressure released, which made her unexpectedly sad. Ochako didn't know what she'd expected. He was ridiculously dedicated to becoming a hero and, like her, he didn't need any distractions, but seeing him look so relieved still hurt. Then again, he probably just wanted to put it behind them, and she honestly should have been thanking him for it. He obviously wasn't interested in her. Her bruised tailbone ample evidence to that fact, and she should be happy that he was willing to take the blame on himself and apologize so they could save their friendship. Okay. He exhaled, shook his head, and smiled at her. In that case, I'm sorry for being weird and bringing it up. Deku, she said, managing to dredge up a smile. You just apologized for apologizing. You're too polite. Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Wait. No. Ochako couldn't help but laugh at that. He really was sweet, and the tension between them lessened another notch. We can totally just be friends. It's no problem. He smiled ruefully at her and rubbed the back of his neck. Quote dot. You know, with the power out and everything, our fridge isn't working. She raised an eyebrow at him. What do you mean? I'm just saying it would be irresponsible of us to let the tubs of ice cream in the freezer go bad. Ochako's mouth slowly spread into an incredulous grin. I didn't know you could be ironic. I'm not being ironic. I'm just saying. You. No. We shouldn't waste food. Izuku was fighting a losing battle to keep from smiling, and Ochako nodding seriously with a perfectly straight face nearly sent him over the edge. You're absolutely right. It's our duty as heroes in training to make sure that none of that ice cream goes to waste. Yes, exactly. Then lead the way, Deku. It was the hardest battle either of them had ever fought, but they prevailed in the end. The Midoriyas had chocolate syrup, and Oreos, and sprinkles, and Izuku looked on in mute horror as Ochako covered her mint chocolate chip with every topping she could, until it was nearly overflowing the bowl. There were little bars of vanilla covered in a thin chocolate shell that she ate like six of, and mochi ice cream that she decimated with glee, and between the two of them they slowly worked their way through every sweet thing in the freezer, save a box of popsicles that Izuku insisted with a panicked look in his eyes she wasn't allowed to eat. Maybe they'd gone bad or something. Between her full stomach, the warm blanket she was wrapped in, and the easy, relaxed conversation she and Izuku had fallen back into, Ochako was starting to feel sleepy. She covered her mouth with her hand as she yawned, and rubbed wearily at her watering eyes as she leaned back into her chair. You okay there, Ochako? Izuku was still sitting on the countertop, just to her right, his legs dangling lazily in the space next to her chair. Hum. Just getting a little tired is all. Izuku chuckled. I don't know if I've ever seen you worn out before. You're always so cheery. You're one to talk, she said, jabbing an accusatory finger at him. You're like a machine when you want to get something done. He shrugged one shoulder as if to concede the point, giving her an embarrassed half smile. Sometimes. I mean, I get obsessed with stuff and work hard, but whenever I think of someone who's able to push past any obstacle, I. He paused for a second, something flickering over his face before he met her gaze levelly. I think of you. Her breath caught in her throat. Really? Yeah, you're super inspiring. Ochako blushed, and he coughed out a laugh. Sorry, that was an intense thing to say, but. He gave her a little smile. It's true. Why does he have to say things like that? I don't know that I am. She protested feebly, reluctant to accept the compliment. Like remember the sports festival our first year. After I lost to Bakugo. I know I didn't tell you, but. You were pretty sad about it. I. Yeah, how did you know? Now it was Izuku's turn to blush. Heard you crying when I was out in the hallway. Sorry. Don't worry about it, she said, shaking her head. That's not even close to the most embarrassing thing I've done in front of you. It's just, I'm not always as happy as I look. I know. It makes me worry, sometimes. Ochako's head snapped around to look at him. He was staring off into the distance, mouth curved in a frown, and he panicked when he noticed the sudden attention. I mean, you're really strong and everything and you're always cheering people on. But I've known you for long enough that I can kind of feel it when you're not doing well and it's just like I wish that I could do something about it. Like I wish that I could help you. Deku. And I wish I could help a lot of people I guess. But you're my friend and I care about you a lot. Like, more than almost anyone. I didn't mean to say that. But, I feel like you're really good at pushing down how you feel so nobody worries, and most people don't notice that about you and Deku. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a really weird thing to say and I know you don't need my help but I. Deku. She said, even though her throat felt funny and she was starting to feel the telltale pinprick of tears behind her eyes. Sorry. What? How many times have you broken a bone? The agitated expression dropped off Izuku's face, replaced by surprise. I have no idea 30 times. 43. What? You've broken 43 bones since you started at UA. Why do you know that? He was looking up at her in disbelief, and her hands were shaking a little bit. Quote dot. Because I figured you wouldn't, she said quietly. And because I figured someone should. Ochako realized with a start that Izuku's eyes were shining faintly in the flickering candlelight, and she could hear him swallow heavily. Because you care about everyone but yourself, Deku. You're so dumb. And she started crying, hiccuping little sobs as she balled her hands into fists, fingernails biting into the skin of her palms so hard it hurt. Her eyes were screwed shut in a futile attempt to keep tears from dribbling haphazard streams down her face, but she could hear him standing up, and all of a sudden, the wind was knocked out of her as he cleared the space between them and wrapped her in a hug. She threw her own arms around him, digging her fingertips into his back like she was trying to find purchase, and she knew was probably getting snot and tears all over his shirt, but she couldn't find it in herself to care. His chest was shaking against her head, and she realized that he was crying too. They stayed like that for a while, holding each other till she got her breathing under control. She sniffled and let go of him with one arm, wedging it between where their bodies were pressed together to rub at her eyes. It occurred to her that his hand was carting softly through her hair. It was surprisingly soothing. Ochako could feel his voice in his chest when he talked. I'm sorry. I've been worrying about you pretending to be okay when you aren't so you can help people, but I can't really. I mean, I feel like a hypocrite for saying that now. Don't, she said miserably. You putting others before yourself is one of the reasons you're gonna be a great hero someday. She felt his chest shake, once, as he let out a sad chuckle. Same with you. It doesn't mean I have to like it. I don't either, Izuku said, still running his hand through her hair. We're only a year away from graduation now, and the closer it gets, the more being a hero starts to sound. The more it starts to sound pretty lonely. Yeah, she risked a glance up at him. He was staring off into the distance, lips pursed in concern. Maybe it is, she said cautiously. He looked down at her suddenly, just as close as when she'd been in his arms in the kitchen. Maybe it is. I bet it could be. She nodded, trying to keep her voice from wavering. And you're okay with that? I. I don't know. I think I could be, but I'm not sure I want to be, she said, coming to the conclusion even as she was saying it. What does that mean? Ochako weighed the words carefully in her head. Maybe they couldn't be in a relationship, but surely they could afford to lean on each other once in a while. It means that you're my best friend too. And it means that I'll come to you when I need help if you promise to do the same. She felt him inhale sharply, and she looked up. Surprise flickered over Izuku's face for a second before his expression settled on something that made her breath catch. It was fierce, determined, like she'd just given him a mission, and she felt a weight lifted from her chest that she hadn't even known was there. I promise. She nearly started crying again, but she buried her face in his chest and breathed out slowly until she was calm, then took a step backward, disentangling herself from him before she could start enjoying the hug too much. Izuku was blinking away the remnants of his own tears, smiling tentatively at her. She giggled. I'm sorry about your shirt. He looked down. There was a wet patch on his chest, and he snorted in laughter. It's okay. I think I'm changing into pajamas soon anyways. And, sorry for calling you dumb. No, I deserved it. He grinned faintly. I can be pretty dumb sometimes. He opened his mouth to say something else, then stopped, eyebrows furrowed, and let out a big yawn. She giggled again, and he shook his head, laughing self-consciously as the yawn finished. I'm getting tired. How you doing, Ochako? I might be a little bit sleepy, she lied. She wasn't sure if it was the crying that had taken it out of her or what, but she was exhausted. All right. He laughed, and stretched his arms over his head languidly. His shoulder popped, and he let out a soft grunt of satisfaction, and for some reason that small sound made her heart stir. She almost missed the next thing he said. Let's get ready for bed. Chapter 4. Okay, Izuku said, with all the seriousness of a general discussing battle strategy. How are we going to do this? Easy. You can take your room. I'll sleep on the couch, Ochako fired back, matching his solemnity as she crossed her arms over her chest. Absolutely not. You're a guest. You should be able to sleep on a bed. I'm an intruder. It would be rude to use your mom's bed, and you should get to sleep in your own, so I'll take the couch. We've got an air mattress, he retorted. I can use that, so you can get an actual bed. HMPH, Ochako grunted, dissatisfied. She rested her hands on her hips, glaring up at him in a caricature of displeasure, though he could see the corners of her mouth tugging slightly upwards at the ridiculousness of the argument. All of a sudden, her face lit up, and she gasped like she'd just had an idea. She snapped her fingers. We should have a sleepover. Izuku stared at her in confusion. Is that not what we're doing? She shook her head vigorously, looking offended, like he'd just tried to pass off a stick figure doodle as the Mona Lisa. Sleeping in the same home isn't a sleepover. You should pull the air mattress into the living room, and then I sleep on the couch and we can talk and stuff. The suggestion triggered every combat reflex he had. Adrenaline paced through his bloodstream in preparation for a fight, eyes narrowing as he automatically scanned the room for possible exit strategies. Sleeping in the same room. Between his untimely realization that Ochako was gorgeous and he wanted to kiss her like burning, and the talk they'd had earlier, he was approaching a meltdown at breakneck speed, and he didn't need any more complications. It felt like he was spinning plates, and every time she smiled at him another one got tossed on. Sounds good to me, he said, doing his best to sound like he wasn't losing his mind. But you're sleeping on the mattress. Ochako sighed, deflating. Fiend. She stayed sullen for less than 5 seconds before she perked up again like something had just occurred to her. Do you think your shower is working? Probably. I'm pretty sure we have a gas heater so the water shouldn't be freezing or anything, yeah. You mind if I use it sometime before we go to bed? I'm a little bit gross from our fight earlier. She was trying to kill him. Oh, why yeah, of course you can. Are you just gonna change back into the clothes you have on now? Or, I think my mom took most of her comfortable stuff with her on vacation, but I guess you could. I'll just wear some of your stuff. She was trying to kill him. Whatever she was doing right now qualified as attempted murder, and if she did anything else like it in the next 10 minutes it would qualify as successful murder because his heart would stop. If it's all right with you, she said when he didn't respond. If you've got any spare shirts or pajama pants or something then I'd appreciate not having to sleep in sweaty clothes. She wrinkled her nose in disgust. Why yeah, of course. Thanks, Deku. She smiled broadly at him, and he imagined he could feel plates starting to wobble. In the end, Ochako insisted that he take the first shower. It's your home, after all. Not to mention, she'd continued, mischievous glint in her eye, I need you gone so I have free rein to rummage through your closet for something comfy. She'd evidently found what she was looking for without much trouble. By the time he'd finished showering and gotten dressed, she was already waiting outside in the hallway. Pair of flannel pajama pants and a familiar white shirt with T-shirt emblazoned on the front bundled in her arms. There are clean towels under the sink, he told her, jerking a thumb over his shoulder to indicate, and the temperature dial sticks, so don't bother being gentle with it unless you want to take
Daddy,
a cold
will you
shower.
put his notebook?
Okay, thank you, Deku. She stood there, looking at him, and he realized suddenly that she was waiting for him to get out of the doorway so she could enter. All right, he said abruptly, face faintly red. I'm going to be as far away as possible, trying desperately to not think about you in the shower. Go set up the air mattress. Let me know if you need anything by. Izuku sidestepped around her and walked quickly away like he was trying to leave a crime scene without being noticed, and he buried his face in his hands as he made his way down the hallway, his cheeks warm. When he got to the living room, he set out on getting the mattress ready with all the intensity of a drowning man grabbing a life preserver. At least it was something he could do that wasn't coming to grips with the fact that his best friend was strong, and pretty, and perfect, and in his shower, eyes closed, cheeks pink, sighing contentedly at the warm water running rivulets down. Nope. Izuku shook out the sheets and started putting them on the mattress, smoothing out every wrinkle with a precision and focus that didn't let him think about anything else. He had a problem, and he wanted to do what he always did when he had a problem, namely, analyze it, but that was getting increasingly difficult to do. Every time he tried, he just ended up thinking about her, grinning up at him when she'd made him float, breathless in his arms after their fight in the kitchen, destroying a bowl of mochi ice cream like it was the last thing on earth. He remembered how they'd cried on each other. She cared about him, just like he cared about her, and the thought sent happiness thrumming through his body like vibrations in a tuning fork, almost overshadowing the guilt that came from making her worry. He basked in the idea of them being there for each other like they'd promised for a too short span of seconds, before he realized that he'd failed abjectly at being logical about his problem again and let out a sigh as he squeezed his eyes shut. She emerged from the bathroom 10 minutes later. She took quick showers, and on balance he wasn't surprised. The pajama pants sat low on her hips even though she'd cinched them as tight as she could, and his shirt was baggy on her. He could see the swoop of her collarbone jutting out just above the neckline. She'd taken off her makeup and dried her hair, and she looked vaguely sleepy and very cozy, and Izuku's breath hitched when he saw her. God, she's beautiful. He had no idea what he was going to do. Asking for his clothes had been, in a word, unwise. They were clean and comfy, but Ochako couldn't help but flush red when she looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. She absolutely looked like one of those girls who borrowed their boyfriend's outfits, and the shirt kind of smelled like him, which was both unexpectedly distracting and oddly comforting. The shower hadn't been nearly as helpful as she'd hoped, either. She'd anticipated for it to be nice to have a couple minutes alone to relax and think the events of the night through. But as it turned out, standing naked in a dark, steamy room shortly after having a tender conversation with the boy you liked didn't lend itself to particularly productive thoughts. Quite the opposite, actually. She felt her face getting hot and breathed in slowly before letting out a quick puff of air. She hadn't ever had this much trouble shutting down her crush before. It was the fact they were so close that was a problem for her. If she could get home tomorrow, a little bit of distance would do wonders for her ability to focus on something besides wanting to kiss him. Not to mention helping to prevent the slightly guilty fantasies ranging from holding hands to altogether more dubious scenarios that had been pervading her mind all day. I just have to make it through tonight. She thought fiercely, standing up straighter and doing her best to banish the thoughts of how easily he had picked her up in the kitchen earlier, and the way his eyes crinkled when he grinned, and how much bigger than her he'd gotten over the past 2 years, and Ochako shook her head like she was trying to dislodge something. She wasn't making it any easier for herself by staying in here. Before she left, she leaned on the sink, inspecting her reflection again. Tired eyes, no makeup, hair messy in a loose bun, wearing formless oversized clothes. Well, she thought wryly, if I'm trying to avoid dating him, at least I'm doing the best I can. Snorting a laugh through her nose, she pushed back off the sink and wheeled around to head back to the living room. Izuku was staring intently at the air mattress like he was concentrating on a particularly tough math problem. For what reason, she couldn't imagine. It looked fine. He was sitting on his heels, balancing on the balls of his feet with his knees off the ground, and he started when she walked in the room, nearly falling over. You okay, Deku? She asked in concern. Oh, yeah. You just, you know. He rose from the floor, unfolding gracefully from a crouching position to his full height and waved a hand vaguely in the air, looking at her like she was going to help him finish the sentence. No, I don't know. We've only escaped death together a couple times, so I understand you forgetting, but I've got zero gravity, not mind reading. He flushed at the joke and cracked an awkward smile. Why you just look are really cute. She remembered her disheveled reflection and felt her face heat up. And no, I don't. I mean, I really appreciate you saying that and everything, but I look really ugly right now, and. No, you don't. You look comfy and relaxed, and. Izuku turned his head away and winced in embarrassment, hand rubbing at the back of his neck as he continued. And I don't know. It's really sweet. Sorry. It probably freaks you out when I say stuff like that. In fairness, he was right, albeit, probably not for the reason he expected. You look cute too. She blurted out, the only response she could think of besides yes, but I'd really desperately like to hear more, please. He looked at her, shock written across his features so plainly that he looked like he'd been shot. It was a genuine enough expression that Ochako had to stifle a giggle, and she regained a little of her composure. Really? She said. And look, we're kinda matching. It was true. They were both wearing flannel pajama pants and white t-shirts, although Izuku filled his out a little better. Actually, a lot better. Absent of the usual trappings of their school uniforms or hero costumes, his muscular body made his clothes look small on him, like he'd had a growth spurt and neglected getting new ones. The t-shirt showed off biceps that she doubted she'd be able to wrap both hands around, although she was struck with a sudden urge to try, and the hem of his shirt had a tendency to ride up, letting her catch flashes of faintly tanned skin and defined abdominal muscles whenever he moved too quick. He chuckled. Kinda. I still think you wear it better. Ochako's eyes snapped up to meet his, and she realized she had gotten distracted. For a second, she was worried he had noticed. He was staring at her with his lips pursed like he was trying to figure something out. But then his eyes lit up. Hold on. Izuku stepped around her, disappearing down the hallway to return a minute later with a mound of plush blankets in his arms, piled high enough that she could just barely see his eyes poking over the top. He tottered over to where he'd arranged the air mattress, surprisingly close to the couch where he'd be sleeping, she noted with a hint of anxiety, and dropped them on the ground with a slightly flushed expression of triumph. You looked cold, he said, by way of explanation. I guess it is starting to get pretty chilly in here, so I wanted to grab these before we went to bed and realized we were gonna freeze without them. He was right. They'd both been bundled in thin blankets, and she'd been sitting next to him all night, taking advantage of the fact he kicked out warmth like a radiator. But the heater hadn't been working for 4 or 5 hours now, and there was a definite nip in the air. Thank you, Deku. I'm starting to. She stopped, covering her mouth with a hand as she yawned, and grabbed one of the thicker blankets, plopping down onto the mattress and wrapping it around herself like a cloak. I'm starting to get pretty tired. He grinned faintly at her and stepped around the mattress so he could slump onto the couch, covering up as well. You don't mind if I blow out the candle, then? Go ahead. Actually, wait. Ochako wriggled her way underneath more blankets, arranging her bed like it was a nest, until it was perfectly cozy. Izuku smiled gently down at her from his perch on top of the couch, waiting until she was done. He was close. She could have reached out her arm and touched him, and she was tempted to for a second, just to prove to herself that she could. Quote dot. Good now. Yep. With that, Izuku blew out the candle, and the room was plunged into darkness. The mood shifted just as instantly. Gone were the pleasant trappings of friendship she tried to maintain. She was in bed feet away from the boy she'd had a crush on for the better part of 2 years, and she was dying, suddenly aware of every sensation. Was she breathing too loud? Could he hear her shifting restlessly as she turned away from him, laying on her side? She couldn't bear to look at him. Seeing Izuku curled up on the couch, faint flush on his cheeks and his expression relaxed would stop her heart. She thought she was tired, but now she was almost painfully awake. Silence reigned for a span of minutes. Hey, Ochako. His voice burbled up out of the darkness unexpectedly, breaking her reverie. He sounded tired. What's up? She whispered back. There was a pause. Good night, he said finally, and for some reason the words lifted a weight that had settled in the pit of her stomach, making her smile uncontrollably. Good night, Deku. She heard him shifting, and she risked a glance over her shoulder. He was curled up, facing away from her, shirt stretched tight against his broad back as his shoulders hunched in, and she was awake long after his breathing slowed. I just have to make it through tonight. I just have to make it through tonight. The words ran through her head until she fell asleep. Ochako woke to a gentle rumbling. What the hell? She was confused at first, the shadow geometry of her surroundings not matching up with what she expected, and it took her a few seconds to recall where she was. Right, Izuku's home. She squinted, trying to look around in the darkness, the bright moonlight fringing around the edges of the window shades and casting dappled shadows over the interior of his living room. She had to suppress a laugh when she identified the source of the noise. Izuku had fallen halfway off the couch, his head and upper torso dangling down to rest on the mattress, and she winced in amused sympathy. That couldn't be the easiest way to breathe, if his strained snoring was anything to go by, and she was surprised he hadn't roused. She briefly considered floating him back up to the couch, but dropped the idea she'd made herself float by accident while sleeping before, and it always woke her up. Courtesy of physics, the sensation that someone got when she removed their gravity felt identical to falling. She didn't want to wake him up, and she definitely didn't want to wake him up if he thought he was about to hit the ground. With his reflexes keyed to high alert from 2 years of villain attacks, and her own luck, he'd probably have some sort of overzealous reaction that would end with his quirk destroying the ceiling. Instead, she sat up, groaning lightly at being forced to move so soon after being in the depths of sleep and decided she'd try to get him to roll onto the air mattress so they could switch places. It'd be easier to sleep on the couch in silence than on the mattress with him snoring, anyway. She wormed her arm underneath his back, twisting it so her forearm pressed against the length of his spine and her hand supported his head. His hair was fluffy and soft, and she had to resist running her fingers through it as she looped her other arm around his leg and pulled, leveraging his body to roll him onto the mattress. Gunhead martial arts, coming in handy once again. Or, they would have. She was still sleepy, and he was completely limp, and instead of him gently coming to a stop on the mattress next to her, he flopped off the couch and landed half on top of her, chest to chest. It knocked the wind out of her, and she gasped in surprise. Izuku shifted in his sleep, frowning as he struggled to process what was happening to him, his eyes fluttering halfway open. In this light, Their brilliant green color was murky and clouded with sleep, and he blinked in confusion at her when she met his gaze. Chaco. The words were whisper quiet and faintly gruff from tiredness. His arm had fallen over her torso, and one of his legs was intertwined with her own, and the sleepy expression on his face skirted the line between being obscenely cute and weirdly hot. His body was pressed up against hers in a way that sent tingles down her spine, and she felt a desperate, wild kind of desire for more. Even as the closeness paralyzed her, she was almost too flustered to respond. Ahem. She managed to squeak out. Izuku grunted contentedly and closed his eyes, like he'd expected her to be there and was only asking to make sure. He pressed his lips against her jawline softly and rolled over onto his side, pulling her with him so they were almost spooning, her back against his chest. He did it so naturally that it took her a couple of seconds to realize what had happened, staring blankly at the wall for a moment before she blushed bright red. Did he just kiss me? Izuku's arms were wrapped around her torso, and she could feel the pressure of his fingertips against her side as he held her gently in an unconscious grip. His breath, still slow and easy, was tickling the back of her neck, and he was warm. Her toes curled at the luxurious heat pressed against her back, so welcome with the chill in the air. He felt solid, an unshakably real presence in the midst of the darkness, and as agitated as she was, it was good, it was comforting to have him there, holding her. It was making her feel safe. It was making her feel protected. It was making her feel sleepy. She could barely keep her eyes open. They fluttered shut once, twice, 3 times, and stayed closed. Ochako felt the tension leaving her muscles, and she let out a little sigh of contentment, unbidden, as she relaxed against Izuku. She'd just give herself a few minutes of rest, and then she'd try to get away. In the morning, he would notice they'd switched positions, but she'd explain that he'd fallen and they'd be able to laugh about it if he'd just happened to have a dream where they'd slept together for a while. Well, dreams are weird like that, right? She could do it, she just had to make it through tonight. Where stories live. Discover now.